I think that you can have two people in a relationship, each person on their own, great person, right? But together, both lack fundamental skills to make a healthy relationship work. And so then they make each other's lives worse. And I think I've seen this a lot, and I have, like, it's super weird, but in the last 4 days, I've had 3 different people reach out to me about instances like this. I've had multiple phone calls. And so I think it's really top of mind, because what I realized, I like people, both the people in the relationship, in all the situations, which is I love the husband, love the wife, or love the girlfriend, love the boyfriend, whatever. But both of the parties involved in the relationship lack communication skills that lead to a productive relationship. And so what they find is that their lives are worse when they're together. And so I was thinking about it because, they're trying to figure out what to do. And it's well, you could end it. And that'll solve it, obviously, because your lives are all getting worse. The other option is that you could work on it. So I suggested, in multiple situations, I was go see an actual, a relationship, either a relationship coach, a counselor, whatever it needs to be. I don't actually think talk therapy is going to be helpful, because I think it's not that you have unresolved issues, it's that you don't know how to communicate. They literally just don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to talk to each other. They don't realize that everything that they're doing is actually harming the relationship, not helping it. And so it's just been top of mind, because I think I just continue to see it over and over again. I think a lot of people, for example, know how to communicate in the workplace, and then they go home and they're shitty to their spouse. They forget all the things that they've learned at work, how to communicate with coworkers, how to communicate with a boss, direct reports, etc., how to be nice, courteous, and then it just goes out the window when they go home. Because for some reason, people see their spouse as an exception to the rules, rather than the one person that you want to practice the most with. And so I think that's part of it, is that there's this underlying feeling is that when you're married to somebody, or when you're in a relationship where you feel like one person might feel like they have leverage over the other, they can speak to them in a way that they don't speak to other people. You know what I mean? It's because I feel like it is so hard for you to leave, I will try less hard to keep you. Because usually in these instances, one person's very insecure, and so they probably won't leave. They'll probably allow themselves to be treated like shit over and over again. And then the other person's super secure, so they're well, why would I treat you better? Because clearly you're not leaving. So they teach them to treat them like shit, because they don't leave. Therefore, they continue to get treated like shit. They don't like getting treated like shit. And then they complain about it. It's well, the only way that you show somebody that this is unacceptable is you leave. That doesn't mean you leave forever. Leave for a week, leave for a few days, leave for a month. You know what I'm saying? And so it's I see this cycle continuing to repeat in the relationships, and I'm they don't even realize that they're both perpetuating the cycle.
Have you found many successful couples that are couples and then decide to work together? Does that seem to be more a common theme you find in people that are struggling in their relationship?
I think I've seen it be successful. The question is, successful to what degree? And I think it works until it doesn't, which is usually that one person in the relationship is incompetent in the workplace and the other one is afraid to tell them. And then the business plateaus, and it continues to plateau or not work or stay stuck because the one spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend doesn't want to tell the other one that they're incompetent. And I think that the reason that me and Alex have been able to continue growing is because we don't have a hard time telling each other if we think that there's something we need to improve on. I don't take it personally. And I ask, is there something I'm doing that's preventing us from growing? It's not like he has to go tell me. I ask for it from him. I'm if I'm doing something that's making us fucking stuck right now, you better fucking tell me. I think if we feel like something isn't working well, I'll ask, is there something that I'm doing or not doing that if I did or didn't do would help the business more? And I think he says in a different way, he says, is there something I can do to be a better partner? And so I think we just ask, and I think it's such a conversation and an ongoing one of I think we both talk about where we need to improve, and then not just with each other, but with other people too. I think we talk about it with the company, And I think we make it known. I think you probably know where we feel like we have deficits. So it doesn't make it like some big amorphous secret, because I feel like a lot of people hide their deficits and they make them like they're bad things that shouldn't be talked about. And if you do that, then you can never work on them. Whereas if you talk about them, there's no shame, there's no nothing, it's just a normal part of life. I think it takes one person to change the dynamic because they train the other one how to treat them. And they also set an example in many instances. So I think if one person can get the courage to change, then the other person will start to change because they are not getting reinforcement like they used to and getting new reinforcement that they didn't used to get. So then they have to figure out how to adjust. I think the best thing I have seen is just setting the example of what you would want from the other person. So it's like everyone always wants the other person to change. I'm like, no, fuck you, go do it yourself. You know what I mean? Like anytime I've ever felt like, and I don't have these thoughts anymore, but like in the beginning of the relationship with Alex, if I ever felt like I wanted something done differently, I just like immediately in my mind would like hold a mirror up and be like, what does that say about me? You know what I mean? Like, what am I not doing? Where am I not skilled enough that if I were more skilled, I wouldn't feel this way? Like what part of maybe what my partner is good at exposes where I'm not good? Like what part of him being, I think a lot of times what I see, especially in like a married dynamic, is like, what part of this person being so good at something exposes something to me of myself of like where I'm insecure. And so I think there's always something that you can learn from that. But I think most of the time it's just easy to point to them and be like, I wish they would change. I think that I believe that most people in every relationship they're in, they're constantly like blaming the partner. It worked or didn't work because of the partner. It will succeed or not succeed because of the partner. And I think it's because they don't take ownership. And so that what ends up happening is that no marriage or partnership succeeds because that person is never able to take full ownership over their life, how they feel, how they respond to somebody. And I think if you use decision-making and logic when you pick somebody, which is like, do they have the same mission? Do they have shared values? And do we have shared interests? Then I see no reason why that relationship can't last as long as you want it to. And so when me and Alex got married, it was like, there's way too much that makes sense for this not to work. And so if there were ever times in the beginning where it felt like, God, something feels like it isn't working, I was like, you just are lacking a skill. Like I would be what I was thinking. I was like, you don't know how to communicate something, or you have something you need to work on, or whatever. And I think I always took the stance of like, I can never change the person I'm married to, but I can change. And then through that, I think that has just brought a lot more good than it has anything else, because like at the end of the day, I think that if you change, people change how they respond to you. So it's like you can't change people and how they behave, but if you change how you behave, people tend to behave differently as well. And Alex and I know that. So it's like if we need to help each other even change, I will change. Like if I know he wants to change in a certain way, if I change how I act with him to help set him up for success, I know that that's a positive. You know what I mean? It's like maybe I start encouraging different things and discouraging other things, or like, you know what I mean? Because I think we have that power over each other. But in the beginning, I think a lot of people just stay in this cycle where they just constantly are thinking like, that person just needs to fix themselves and I'm just gonna go find somebody else. But in the reality, if you've used sound decision-making to select your partner, then it's just a matter of you probably don't have certain skills that are needed to create a productive relationship. And I know for us, there's a lot of skills I didn't have in the beginning. And that's why it's harder in the beginning and it's easier and easier over time, is because I've accumulated more and more of those skills, just like business. When we first started Gym Launch, people would come up to me. It was like the number one question guys will ask. They're like, how do I get my wife to work with me? And I was like, this is the wrong question, because like you shouldn't be asking, how do I get my wife to work with me? You should be asking like, what does my wife want for her own life? And if it's not working with you, who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? And I think it's so, I get why people think it, but I don't think that I think if somebody, I wish that there had been a camera on us in the beginning so they could have seen like all I cared about was career. all I cared about was learning more about business. And Alex was the same way, and we just happened to meet. And I think people think, oh, Leila, she probably, I'm like, do you see who it's not like I was never, you know what I mean? Like I've always been very driven. And so I think it's very hard for people to see because they assume, especially because Alex is so intense, he must have had such huge influence. Of course he's had influence, but he didn't have influence like that when we first met. You know what I mean? And I think it's very hard to get somebody who has, like, I have been an autonomous person, right? Like I left my hometown. I went to California on my own. I made it work. I made my own money. I built up my whole business. You can't coerce somebody like that into doing something they don't want to do because I have free agency. And so I think a lot of the times what people think is that I must have been influenced over time to do something like that. And so they think they can do that with their wife. And I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. I don't have advice for those people. You know what I mean? Especially like if your wife is her own free person and acts out of free agency, which there are relationships that don't because one person's way more intelligent. But if she does, then in my opinion, it makes sense that you allow her to figure out whatever she wants to do for herself. And in the end, that's best for the relationship. And I think a lot of people think it'd be really great if we work together. It's like, well, if you both want the same thing and have complementary skill sets, and it should be approached like any other business partnership, which is like, does this person have a complementary skill set to me? If so, what does it look like in terms of like equity stake? Are we 50-50? Is it 30-70? Is it what? And then what's our roles and responsibilities on both sides? And what are we going to commit to? And then also, what would end this partnership? And so a lot of times, like in the last few days when honestly, it's been the men that have come to me and said, I don't think I should have my spouse or my partner in the business with me. I've said, if this person was not your spouse and they were just a business partner, would you have even started with them? And they're like, honestly, no. And I'm like, all right, well then you have your answer. And they're like, but I'm afraid it will hurt my marriage. And I'm like, dude, if you stay, keep your wife in the business and the business continues to plateau or be stuck because she's not the right person, your marriage is dead right now. In the short term, the marriage might feel worse. In the long term, you're saving your marriage by getting her out. And I think a lot of people see it backwards. They're just thinking, short term, I don't want the blow up. Short term, I don't want to have this conversation. But I'm like, long term, you create so much more dysfunction if you allow this person to be in the business when they're not actually the person you need.